We are live. This is the market update on the fly Saturday morning edition. I am your host, Bill Noble. This is a self-produced market update. So I am going to make sure that some people join. It looks like I'm losing my chat function on top of it. Craziness, chaos in the market. All right. Now, let's begin with how I'm going to do this stream today. Last night, there was an interview with, say, a geopolitical leader, okay? And I'm going to go over that, but I want to make sure that somebody DMs me on Twitter, okay, to make sure that people can hear me. All right, we're still going to actually wait for some people to try to file in here. All right. Now, in the event people can hear me, let's talk about this. Bitcoin up on Saturday morning, right? That means, you know, the Bitcoin ETF guys are not playing around, so Bitcoin can move around. Last night was a big interview with a geopolitical leader. Okay. Can't really say many details about that on this platform, but the bottom line is, you know, negative things were said about the US dollar. Then the leader of this country came out at a press conference and, you know, there were issues with his ability to communicate. Then somebody came out, another politician in the center-ish, and said that basically the United States is ungovernable because they couldn't pass a bill and agree on geopolitical issues here at home and abroad, reinforcing this whole idea that I've had for a while that the United States is ungovernable. Okay? Meaning, you know, the value of the dollar can decline over time. And even if that doesn't happen, okay, Bitcoin can start rallying in advance of that. Now, what we're witnessing on Saturday morning is a slow-moving rally, right? It's a slow-moving rally, but it's like the stock market. I know you hate that, but it's like the stock market. It's like building, building, building. You know, altcoins go up and can't necessarily hold a bid, right? So you can get these 10% spurts in alts, which is why in my Patreon group, we've shifted, right, to like a tactical viewpoint on altcoins. So speaking of that, you know, this show is brought to you by my Patreon. Let me share screen here and bring this up. So in my Patreon, whoops, wrong screen share. In my Patreon, last night, we got a group of guys involved early. Like this rally that you saw overnight. Okay, I was able to get people involved early. Okay, so here is altcoin chart package last night. And here is the article about the game-changing event that occurred in Bitcoin. Another word about Bitcoin. Wall Street players, okay, will see this event as something that can affect the foreign exchange markets and potentially gold. Because I think what happened here was kind of so big that, again, it warrants this on-the-fly live stream. So assuming anybody can hear me, I'm going to go through some news. Okay, Ethereum developers are trying to create their own event for March 13th, right? An upgrade to their mainnet. So about Ethereum. To state the obvious, Ethereum is not Bitcoin. Okay, it's not. And it's not Solana either. So what can happen with ETH is, because kind of it feels like no one owns it from a tactical trading point of view, like you can get these spurts to the top end of the range, like 2,400 to 2,600. And even if ETH does break out, right, I think all it's going to do is fuel a bigger move in Bitcoin, Okay. Last night, there were fires in response to this interview that I discussed. Okay. Federal spending is growing way faster than revenue. This was also mentioned last night in this interview. Okay. Interest on the national debt is already running at a rate over $1 trillion a year. Okay. That's the interest. Okay, it's bigger than our defense budget. And within a few years, interest payment on the debt will be the largest item on the federal budget, bigger than Social Security. Now, this is a known issue, right? It is a known issue, but at some point it gets traded. It gets traded into foreign exchange markets, or it gets traded in crypto. The events of last night were so highly publicized. This was the first time that I think the American public actually got a real talking to about a combination of our deficits, of some of our foreign policies that as it relates to the dollar and the SWIFT system, and who can use it and who can't. So when we act like this, when we, talk about taking people's property or prevent people from using US dollars, they've gone, the BRICS countries is what they're called. They start developing systems outside the dollar, which again, were happening anyway, but this type of thing accelerates. And I don't think it's an accident that you wake up the day after this interview and Bitcoin is like trying to pull the whole rest of the market with it. Now, is it a slow churn? Are you getting explosive moves in altcoins? No, not right now. You're not. Okay. But if you consider what could happen on Monday morning, in other words, if big hedge fund players and big mutual fund houses who are already bullish Bitcoin, and they wake up and Bitcoin has kind of gotten away from them over the weekend, this sets up a move where, there could be more buyers than sellers at 48K where the resistance is in Bitcoin. Okay. Now, again, speaking of geopolitical events, okay, U.S. enemies has been spending 5 years ready to attack infrastructure, which could also include water. And this is also getting around, right? Okay. In other words, okay, somebody is saying, yes, he sees me live. Great. People got to start looking at the US dollar potentially as a metric of measuring the health of the United States. Okay. So there's issues with the United States, which were brought to the attention last night. There's issues with US banks, which I've talked about in the premium group, right? On Patreon, right? Which the link is in the description below. So I've talked about that on Patreon. I've talked about that on the market update, right? Problems in China, problems with the United States government, problems with the dollar, problems with US banks. What does this add up to? It's gotta add up to something constructive for Bitcoin. Really, the only thing that's missing, honestly, is the big players going, okay, I have to market buy it. And again, like stocks, you can just see this, like the market going up the wall of worry. Now, a brief word about the Fed. Let's switch over to this. Okay. U.S. politics says U.S. politics now impossible. So they can't get anything done in Congress. And let's go back to why Jerome Powell was so hawkish, right? So let's use this instead. Okay. And I didn't put this together. So commercial real estate, major problems. Okay. Credit card delinquencies in the United States rise to its highest level since the COVID pandemic, right? complete mess. Why is the Federal Reserve so hawkish? Like, why are they saying, no way we're cutting rates, no way we're doing this, no way we're doing that? And you know what? Last night it hit me. Because obviously they could have guessed that this leader that was interviewed last night was going to say negative things about the dollar. And they didn't want to appear dovish or cutting rates, even though that seems like an obvious path. While somebody's saying negative things about the dollar, they were probably somewhat afraid that it could get disorderly. Now, to be fair, this world leader did say that it was a mysterious phenomenon that no matter how many dollars we print, there's still demand for the dollar, which, that is true. Okay, but the value of the dollar and how that eventually catches up with us, and the fact that the Federal Reserve had to be hawkish in the face of an obvious commercial real estate debacle, right? Like just like temporarily switching gears to charts, right? Like if you look at what's going on in some of the bank stocks, and again, I've been feeding this to my Patreon group pretty steadily, right? This is the regional bank ETF, okay? And I know that this is a very busy chart, but this thing where the Bill Williams Alligator, he was a quant analyst who was very into like charting trends and finding where trends begin and end, okay? This is a massive downtrend in U.S. regional banks waiting to happen, like a massive downtrend. And it could also turn around and affect big banks because, again, Jamie Dimon came out and said, hey, we could be headed for a recession. So I don't think it's wise to underestimate breadcrumbs that have been left, which can be, potentially negative for the dollar, but even more bullish for Bitcoin. Okay. And I like this. Okay. So a former president says that Bitcoin is everyone walking around with a Swiss bank in their pocket. I guess implying that you can use Bitcoin to hide money. So Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, was testifying in front of Congress that, everything that's not a security in crypto should be regulated, right? People forget that when Janet Yellen was running the Fed, she was printing $85 billion a month for no reason. This was way after the 2008 crisis. So why are these guys so afraid of, say, an interview? Why are they afraid of crypto? Because A, crypto makes you free. B, crypto rising in price can send a very powerful message that cannot be controlled. It's a number. It's a number available all over the world. And that's why I'm live now, because I'm looking at the events of last night going, wow. In other words, this geopolitical event occurred, which again, by the way, the video review on that is in Patreon, and it's actually in the free section. So if you want to check that out, the link is down below in the description, and I'll be sure to put up a QR code in a minute. So if you want to see the full read, obviously go there. For the market update public, you have an event, that could have changed people's minds psychologically and made a U.S. population, which doesn't often think about the value or the place of the dollar. And that was actually stated, right? The guy went on and on about it. And then Bitcoin started rallying. Now, again, Bitcoin is a stair-step function higher. We'll go over the charts, right? It's not 10 to 15% up at a time, but still, the name of the stream is Bullish Game Changer. And as long as Bitcoin doesn't wind up going back below 44K, MicroStrategy buys $37 million in Bitcoin, just continues to buy it. So as Grayscale and GBTC sell Bitcoin because everybody is switching Bitcoin investment vehicles in the stock market, BlackRock and MicroStrategy continue to buy. That's why you have Bitcoin in this little tight range. Really, it seems like every time MicroStrategy has bought Bitcoin going all the way back to 10K, most of the transactions seem to get done in a very tight range. And when you exit that range, which is something we'll go over because I'm going to do a lot of this on PowerPoint and some of it on live TA, right? You know, you're going to be able to see that when Bitcoin leaves this range, there really isn't a lot of resistance. There really isn't until 48K, right? And then there is also the potential, okay, looking at a Bitcoin dominance chart, which you should stick around to see, looking at a Bitcoin dominance chart where Bitcoin dominance could go from 52% to 57% because Bitcoin just absolutely trends where altcoins move in these like almost random spurts. So do not underestimate what can happen with Bitcoin because I'm not the only person seeing this. Not the only person seeing this, particularly when it comes to like the Wall Street mentality. Okay, now I'm going to shift over to PowerPoint. For your market update. Okay, I started the week with where's my Bitcoin rally? So some rather boisterous stuff on Twitter, at which point I got admonished by somebody for being boisterous and emotional, saying I should go learn TA, which is funny. Okay, now I did take that to heart though. I was like, you know what? Maybe we need a more detailed picture of like some of my thought processes, which is what this stream is all about. So I'm going to start with some altcoins. These are some of the altcoins that we're discussing in Patreon. So in say something like Render, you've got support around 440. Now these triangles are what are called fractals that come from something called from Bill Williams, famous quant TA guy. Now what you're going to see is in Render, obviously because this is a high, there's a lot of distance between here and resistance. So there's a lot of room to move, leaning on support, resistance up top, you know, Render, and we'll look at Fetch in a minute, I think, told Patreon people last night, hey, this is close to support. You know, you can get involved here, and at a minimum, there could be a spurt to 5 and maybe a trend to 671 eventually. But there's a lot of room to move from support to resistance. Now, Solana. Can Solana get going? Okay, this is called an alligator. It's essentially a group of moving averages, and it's hinting that Solana is like starting to go from range back to trend. Obviously, confirmation of that will be taking out these fractal resistances at 107, and if it does, there's nobody home until 116. Okay, could you get a one-day big spike in Solana? Yes. That's kind of what these things feel like they can do. They can do like sit, lurch up, and then start ranging again. Okay, but can you imagine where Bitcoin is if Solana takes out 107 and goes to 116? Like every time you look at an altcoin chart now after last night, I'm saying, okay, if this altcoin does this, what's Bitcoin going to be doing? Okay, ETH. So ETH has already taken out its fractal resistance at 2,400. And really, there's no reason why it can't be at 2,600. Now, based on the statistical study I did when I was at another company or did in conjunction with another Wall Street analyst, ETH does well when the dollar goes down, gold goes up, or silver goes up, or some combination. So if you wake up Monday and gold and silver are up or the dollar is down, then ETH can just smoke to 2,600 because there's really no resistance, and you can make an argument that a new uptrend is beginning. Now, of course, the issue in ETH is, does anyone care? Does anyone care? That's a good question, right? I like to think that ETH as a currency and an asset, right, is still worthy of it being able to trend with the rest of the market. Like being an absolutist, like, you know, ETH is good, or, you know, there's only, you know, Solana is good and everything else is bad. You know, black and white thinking doesn't always serve you. Doesn't. So if there's no resistance in ETH. And even if ETH goes up and is soft, because I think everybody is still in a mode where they're looking for the type of price action that you saw in December. And crypto may not be that way anymore. It may not. It may be this orderly, up, sit, right? Because maybe there's not enough liquidity in the system for that kind of parabolic, and because it may be all about Bitcoin. Okay, I even threw Litecoin in an example, right? Litecoin, not massively exciting from a mooning standpoint, but if Litecoin does clear 73, there's not a lot of resistance until 77. And if Bitcoin does take off, can it take the Bitcoin complex with it? Can this idea of we need something other than the dollar spread? That's why I'm bringing up Litecoin, in addition to the fact that somebody in the Patreon group requested it. Now, again, Fetch, right? No resistance of material weight until 63 cents, and then above that 70. So, when I'm looking at altcoins for the market update and for Patreon, basically I'm just looking for coins that, they have a lot of distance between where they are now and resistance. Because really, again, what you're getting in altcoins is you get these 10% spurts, right? Like, we were talking about flow earlier in the week, and, some of these things just spike and then that's it. You got to take the money, which again is all part of the strategy that I'm advocating here and elsewhere in advance for premium members. Okay, so let's talk about ETH on a 4-hour chart. So the good news is ETH is breaking out somewhere north of 24.75. This was a big, resistance point where this most recent give up trade started. So if ETH breaks this, comes back and retests it, it can go higher. And this DeMark work, which you can't really see it because there isn't any, indicates that, this trend is theoretically just starting. So if they can keep it going, right, you can have, 9 more bullish, or, you can have effectively, if you're looking at a 4-hour chart, you can have 2 or 3 more bullish days before you have to worry about a pause. And don't forget about Bitcoin monthly, right? I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4. So these DeMark trends, the first part, they have 9 bars. You're counting a set of conditions, like the high is higher than the high 2 days ago, something like that. So normally the way it works is you go 1, 2, 3, 4. The pullback is on the 4th bar, which you got last month, right? It went to 48K and then it went below 40. And then the trend should resume. And look, the trend is resuming. You could have 5 February, 6 March, 7 April, right? And then you could have 9 after the Bitcoin halving. So Bitcoin can continue this grind. And again, on a monthly basis, the DeMark system shows resistance is at 60K. They can go into the Bitcoin halving, right, above 60K. Now, you may get volatility in March. I don't know. But what I do know is that Bitcoin is trading like a stock. And I think that when crypto people look at it, they go, well, this doesn't look like a breakout. Yeah, it doesn't look like a crypto breakout, but it looks like a legacy-driven breakout, which, of course, nobody really wants to hear that. But, everybody wanted the Bitcoin ETF. So the Bitcoin ETF probably drives Bitcoin at this point. So it's not shocking that Bitcoin might start acting like a stock, because you can feel it. Like Bitcoin goes up 4%. And it's like, oh, yeah, here we go. It's going up 8%, but then it pulls back. And everyone's like, oh, no. Is it going to drop in my face? A couple guys I follow, if it's still above 44K, it's okay. You don't want a situation with Bitcoin, okay? You don't want a situation with Bitcoin. I'll bring the chart back up on an intraday basis. You don't want a situation with Bitcoin where this breakout up is a false breakout. You don't want that. Okay, but again, that slow grind higher is fooling people. Again, same slow grind higher in Solana. I'm hoping Solana's got the juice to go from 106 maybe up to 125 or 117. If you look at the DeMark work, it most certainly can. Okay. People asking about Kaspa, noticing Kaspa's in this range, right? And then there are all these fractal points right around 13 cents. So if Kaspa breaks out, right, even though they're kind of doing it all on one day, it wicks up and comes back. If it holds, okay, you got to remember, they got a couple days to play with, they got 2 full days to play with crypto between now and Monday, obviously, right? So if stuff rallies and then pulls back on the same day and holds, then, whatever 2-day spurt you can have in altcoins, in my opinion, you got to be there to take advantage of that. And I know this is a little bit ironic, but any speculative juices in altcoins, like anything that gooses Kaspa and Solana, right, and creates a green environment across the board, I think that's going to encourage people to get into Bitcoin, right? In other words, people are going to see green across the screen. They might go for the altcoins, but the masses, right, all the general public with the Coinbase account, anybody who's got access to the Bitcoin ETFs through their stock accounts, right, the institutions that have to buy Bitcoin, okay, what are they going to do, right? They're going to come in and they're going to start market buying Bitcoin. Altcoins kind of like, they're kind of like the icing on the cake. Bitcoin is the cake. Altcoins make the market look decorative and attractive, enticing. But then, when they go after it, they want the cake. They want Bitcoin, right? And of course, that feeds on itself, right? Altcoins dress up the market. People go for Bitcoin. Bitcoin smokes to the upside. Alts wait, and then alts can go. Right. Really what this market needed was some kind of catalyst. And I'm live on Saturday morning telling you that catalyst could have been last night. In other words, what I would call dollar awareness. And even if the dollar doesn't move, there's the debt, there's the credit cards, there's the blah, there's the blah, there's the blah, and there's the Fed being hawkish because they are afraid of probably the dollar and afraid to put liquidity into crypto because it's embarrassing. And the current U.S. administration, you can Google it. They don't need any more embarrassment. They started like putting out statements and putting people up at the podium that shouldn't be up on the podium. I feel sorry for the guy, right? I mean, they should let him retire. Seriously. But in the meantime, what image is being projected for the United States? Now let's talk about Bitcoin dominance as it relates to altcoin. And this could be the mother of all charts that people are just not looking at. So this is a diamond, right? Just as plain as day. And Bitcoin dominance, with all these quant metrics like this Alligator moving average is starting to open up. You realize that if you take out 53% in Bitcoin dominance, these diamond formations can be unbelievably powerful. Unbelievably powerful. This was at the bottom of MicroStrategy. This was on the 4-hour chart of Bitcoin not too long ago. I mean, how do you get 4 percentage points of movement in Bitcoin dominance? Well, there's only 2 ways. You either have to have Bitcoin at 60K with the rest of the market kind of following along a little bit, or you have to have a sharp drop in alts with Bitcoin holding a bid. Now, I don't know about a sharp drop in alts. Crypto can always go down. We all know that. God, man, after last night, I am leaning towards like just a massive, massive realization about Bitcoin, particularly now that I'm thinking of it, particularly if they can't weaken the dollar. Like, in other words, if the dollar should go down and it doesn't, then the trade has to be expressed somewhere else. Way to express the trade. Bitcoin. Okay, that's the market update PowerPoint. Now, let's try to shift into live TA. Sometimes people like this. It's effectively like watching me figure it out on the fly. So let's go to Bitcoin for just a minute on the 4-hour chart and discuss this. So this was the diamond formation on the 4-hour chart. This defined the range. Okay. This is what the Williams Alligator looked like, yesterday. Now, as this trend started, as you broke out of the diamond, right, you can see the power of the breakout. It's vertical. And as you can look at the candlestick as I'm talking, 10 a.m. Central Time on February 9th, people seem to be interested in buying the dip. Okay, even at 47K. And of course, that makes sense because I'm sure legacy trading desks and OTC desks are all coming in to the office this morning. And if they're not there this morning, they will definitely be there on Sunday night going, oh no, what do we do? Like, what do we do? Well, I think the answer is simple, right? The fractal at 48K is the only thing in Bitcoin's way. Like, in other words, this Williams analysis, I mean, these fractals can be, sometimes they can be confusing, particularly in ranges. But when you start a trend, you take this out, the market's making a statement. If you take 48 out, they'll buy the next dip. They'll buy the next dip. And if 48 holds, like I said, people are going to be hitting the market buy button. Okay, ETH. All right, maybe this little shelf is stopping ETH. But again, ETH comes to things, right? It comes to resistance and then it kind of breaks it and then it backs off. So it's not easy to trade, right? You get fooled, right? Like, I'll take the fractals off. Okay. So again, here's ETH, right? Here's what's happening. Do you see how it kind of takes out resistance here in this block, 2,500? This is a 4-hour chart. So let me label this. And again, this is a study in the nature of the new crypto price action. Okay. You break out, but then you retest, right? And you want to jump on these moves when this Williams Alligator is just starting to open up. See how it's all tangled up in this range? You don't want to do trades when this indicator based on moving averages is all tangled up. But as soon as it starts to open up, it starts to take out the fractal resistances. It just keeps going. It just keeps going, right? So, if ETH, which is, I don't know, kind of the new redheaded stepchild, can act like this, okay, this can spread. Now, one thing I was also looking at, ironically, was Polkadot. Not a lot of people talking about Polkadot these days. Okay, Polkadot hasn't been able to break 7. So, brutal failed rally right here. And the question is, after breaking through 7, has something changed in Polkadot? And that's the question that you're going to be asking yourself about any altcoin you look at, right? In other words, this is the way it's been, right? And, that's pretty much, frankly, sucked because nothing is happening. But is something happening now? Right? In other words, if resistance gets broken, when it gets retested, does it hold? And if it does, then stuff turns around and goes materially higher. Now, whether it's Polkadot, whether it's Solana, I'm starting to get the feeling that perhaps the things that are under-owned may wind up going up. So here's Avalanche testing resistance, right, on a 4-hour chart. Now, these streams, they get left up for, a week. So, if you're watching this 3 days from now and Avalanche failed at 37, then, crypto is probably stuck in some kind of, I don't know, frankly, not so fun range like this, right? That's really all there is for alts. However, if things like Avalanche can start breaking out, and like 3 or 4 days from now, you know, Avalanche is at least holding, like say at 40, right? Where does that put Bitcoin? In other words, we're so used to a world where Bitcoin moves 3% and alts move 10 to 15%. That can still happen. But right now, when you go back and look at the Bitcoin dominance chart, it looks like Bitcoin dominance wants to just smoke to the upside. Now, let's just take briefly a look at the dollar, which is obviously not trading today on Saturday. Okay. Okay, so there is a big diagonal resistance point in the dollar near 104. I'm going to try to see if I can zone in on this. Okay, so I drew this on a long-term chart of the dollar, a quarterly chart. Okay, this is called a fib speed resistance line. I'm actually going to take Williams off for this. Now, this is off the 1985 high in the dollar, off something called the Plaza Accord, which was an agreement among G7 countries that the dollar was way too strong and needed to go down. So the market just took it down. Now, the dollar index has been pounding on this for over a year, and it can't make it. And the Federal Reserve has to cut rates. So let me, and of course, I've been saying this, you know, all day, dollar index should be at 85. That's my opinion. Let me ask you one quick question. Bitcoin has managed to get to 48K without the dollar going down. What happens if they get cooperation from the dollar? Like, what does that do to Bitcoin? How much accelerant does that add to the move? Now, speaking of Bitcoin, here's things like Hut mining. Hut mining went to $18 in December, and it's now trading at $8. Galaxy Digital, a crypto hedge fund stock. They were selling it to you at $8 10 days ago. Now it's headed for a gap at 13, as we discussed, both on the market update, okay, and in Patreon. How high can this go if Bitcoin continues to gap up like this? In other words, again, people in legacy are going to walk in. They could walk in to 50K Bitcoin on Sunday. Sunday night, they're all coming in to work. The futures contract starts trading. The ETF will start trading Sunday night, and they're looking at Bitcoin at 50K, and they missed it because nobody expected this interview last night to be about the dollar. And people in legacy are going to understand that. They're going to understand it. Okay. Let's review. There may not be enough liquidity in the altcoin market, okay, for sustained uptrends. So you may get these like 15% spurts, and then you either have to take the money or you have to just accept the fact that it's going to be up 15, down 7, up 15, down 7, down 15, up 7. That's just how it's going to trade. That's not advanced TA. That just appears to be how the market is moving. That said, don't let that fool you about what Bitcoin can do. Because Bitcoin TA looks good. It's slow moving, which people in crypto are not used to. And that allows people to get caught really off guard. In other words, when you look at the history of something like NVIDIA or any stock, you know, it just kind of moves orderly. And then there's an earnings announcement and then it gaps. Now, there's no earnings announcement in Bitcoin, but there is this ETF flow thing to consider. So if you haven't watched all that interview, you can skip the first 20 minutes, but the snippets are all over Twitter about the dollar, about Swift, about the $33 trillion in debt. In other words, these things are not top of mind on a day in and day out basis in crypto. They're known in legacy, but not yet traded, right? In other words, 2008, Silicon Valley Bank, you know, the banks today, the problems in China, it's known, commercial real estate, but not traded. And what's happening now is the market is beginning to trade these narratives. They may be doing it slowly, but that doesn't mean it can't last, because frequently slower rallies are sustainable rallies. And there is something called climbing the wall of worry. It's a saying in legacy. So people are like, oh no, is it going to go down? Am I going to get a dip? Is it going to go to 36K? And it just kind of keeps climbing, right? People are like, oh, I'm afraid to get in. It's, I'm afraid it's going to go to 42. Not an unreasonable concern, but what you have to do is, and again, I teach my Patreon people these things in something called 6th Street Crypto, right? In other words, every night I'm like, providing almost like a kind of a fireside chat of how to approach the market, right? Climbing the wall of worry is slow. It's hard on you psychologically because you worry, but the best trades are the toughest trades. So let me just throw this up there at the end. So if you'd like what you've heard, in the words of Jordan Peterson, I'd like you to consider joining Patreon, right? This is a QR code that will get you there. The link is in the description below. It's in my Twitter bio. The world has changed. The Bitcoin game changer is on. The good news is I got a crypto background of 4 years and 20 years in legacy. So for the price of admission into the Patreon, my concluding message for the market update is let me help you understand what's going on, right? If there's a trend, it's your friend. Now, if the trend's not your friend, we've also got plans in Patreon for what happens if this is just a stuck range until the halving, right? Always have a plan. We have a plan, but I want to invite you to let me help you. Okay, that's the flash market update for Saturday.